Most people do not underestimate compounding because the math is difficult. They underestimate it because the beginning looks too small to respect. $1 of growth does not feel powerful. A few months of saving does not feel life-changing. Even the first few years can look almost boring. But that boring beginning is where the machine is being built. Welcome to Robert. Clear ideas for learning only, not personal financial advice. When people hear the word compounding, they usually think of a formula, a calculator, or a chart that bends upward over time, and that is useful. But if we only see compounding as math, we miss the deeper lesson. Compounding is not just about money growing. It is about progress becoming part of the next starting point. That is why it can become so powerful over time. And the way I see it, this is where most people misunderstand the topic. They think compounding is a trick for getting rich. I think it is more honest to call it a test of whether you can respect progress before it looks impressive. The simplest definition is this. Compound interest is when you earn interest not only on the money you started with, but also on the interest that has already been added. Here is a simple example. If you have $100 and it earns 5% in 1 year, you have $105. That part is easy. But in the second year, the 5% is no longer working on only the first $100. It is working on 105. So the second year ends at $110.25. That extra 25 cents sounds tiny. It is not impressive. It will not change anyone's life. But it proves something important. In my opinion, that tiny 25 cents is the most underrated part of the example. Not because the money is large, but because it shows the moment when the system stops depending only on your original effort. The system has changed. The original money is no longer the only worker. The growth has started working too. That is the heart of compounding. At first, the new worker is small, almost invisible. But if the process continues, more of the return comes from past returns. Then those returns also become part of the base. The base becomes larger, the next return is calculated on a larger base, and slowly the machine becomes less dependent on the original amount. This is why the first stage of compounding can feel disappointing. You save money, but the result looks small. You invest regularly, but the account does not move in a dramatic way. You reinvest. But the early numbers do not feel worth the patience. So people start asking, is this even working? That question is understandable because human beings are wired to notice visible change. We notice a big raise, we notice a sudden profit, we notice a huge purchase. But compounding often begins as a quiet process. It does not arrive like an explosion. It arrives like a base being built under the floor. And because the base is hidden, many people quit before the later years arrive. This may be the most important behavioral lesson. Compounding often fails in real life not because the formula is weak, but because the human gets bored before the curve gets interesting. This is why I do not think the main enemy is lack of knowledge. Many people already understand the idea. The real enemy is impatience that disguises itself as intelligence. It says, "This is too slow." It says, "There must be a faster way." It says, "Normal progress is for people who do not know the secret." But most of the time, the secret is not a secret. It is staying with the process long enough for the later years to matter. The curve is not exciting at the beginning. It is not supposed to be. The early years are doing a different job. They are building the amount that future years can work on. Think about it like planting a tree. In the beginning, most of the work is underground. The roots are growing, the structure is forming, but if you judge the tree only by what you can see above the ground, you may think nothing is happening. Then years later, the growth looks faster. Not because the tree suddenly became magical, but because the foundation had been expanding quietly the whole time. Money can work in a similar way. The first deposits build the base. The early returns are small. The later returns can become larger because they are working on a larger amount. This is why time matters so much. Return rate matters, but time controls how many compounding cycles you get. One rough mental model is the rule of 72. You divide 72 by an estimated annual return to get a rough idea of how long it might take money to double. For example, At an estimated 8% annual return, the rough doubling time is about 9 years. This is only an estimate, not a guarantee. I do not like using this rule as a prediction. Predictions can make people overconfident. I like using it as a reminder that time is not passive. Time is doing work in the background if the base is still there. Real investments do not move in smooth straight lines. Some years are good, some years are bad. Some years test your patience. But the rule of 72 helps reveal the real point. Time creates cycles. And cycles are where compounding gets its power. If money doubles once, the result is helpful. If it doubles twice, the result becomes much more meaningful. If it doubles several times over a long life, the later doublings can matter more than the first one. Because doubling a small amount is not the same as doubling a large amount. Doubling $1,000 creates another 1,000. Doubling 100,000 creates another 100,000. The percentage may be the same, but the impact is not. This is why late-stage compounding can look so surprising. The math did not suddenly change. The base changed. Here is the central reframe. The most powerful part of compounding is not what your money earns this year. It is that this year's growth may become next year's worker. Once that happens enough times, time stops being only a calendar. It becomes part of the engine. This is also why waiting has a cost. Many people say, I will start when I have more money. That sounds reasonable. And sometimes, if someone has high-interest debt or no emergency buffer, there may be other priorities first. But the dangerous version of this thought is waiting forever for the perfect starting point. My view is that waiting for more stability can be wise, but waiting until you feel like a completely different person can become expensive. Because the habit itself is part of what changes the person. Because compounding does not only need money, it needs time. And time that is lost cannot be deposited later. A person who starts with a small amount early is not automatically better than a person who starts with a larger amount later. The real world depends on income, expenses, debt, return, risk, behavior, and consistency. But the person who starts earlier gets one advantage that cannot be manufactured at the end. More cycles. More cycles for contributions. More cycles for reinvestment. More cycles for learning how to stay consistent. That last part matters more than people think. Compounding is not only a financial process, it is also a behavior test. Can you keep going when the result looks small? Can you avoid interrupting the process because another opportunity looks louder? Can you resist the urge to chase unrealistic returns because normal progress feels too slow? Can you keep adding when the market feels boring and stay calm when the market feels frightening? This is where many people accidentally damage their own compounding. They start, then stop. They invest, then panic. They save, then spend the entire base. They chase a hot idea, lose money, and then have to rebuild from a smaller foundation. They focus only on return, but ignore fees, taxes, debt, and behavior. And those things matter because compounding can work against you too. This is where I think many money videos become too optimistic. They talk about compounding as if it only works in your favor. But life does not work that cleanly. High-interest debt can compound in the wrong direction. Fees can quietly reduce the amount that stays invested. Bad habits can repeat until they become expensive. Lifestyle obligations can absorb every raise before the raise becomes capital. The same force that helps small progress grow can also make small leaks grow if they repeat for years. So the lesson is not simply invest and wait. The better lesson is protect the base. That is my real opinion on compounding. Do not worship it, protect it. Because a powerful process can still fail if the conditions around it are weak. Protect it from panic, protect it from high-cost debt, protect it from fees you do not understand. Protect it from the habit of starting over every time life feels uncomfortable. Because compounding needs continuity. It needs something to remain in the system long enough to become larger. That is why small amounts can matter. Not because $5 or $10 will magically make someone rich, but because repeatable action creates a base. And the base is what time works on. A small amount repeated for years can teach the most important behavior. Money gets a job before the world gives it a distraction. At the beginning, that job may be emergency savings, then it may be reducing expensive debt, then it may be long-term investing, then it may be building skills that increase earning power. All of these can compound. Money can compound, knowledge can compound, health can compound, reputation can compound. The pattern is similar. What you build today makes tomorrow's progress easier, and tomorrow's progress makes the next day easier again. That is why compounding is one of the most important ideas in personal finance. It teaches that the future is not built only by huge decisions. It is often built by small decisions that are allowed to repeat long enough. So how do you use this idea in a grounded way? My practical view is simple. Do not try to make compounding exciting. Make it repeatable. First, start with an amount you can repeat. A plan that looks impressive for 2 weeks is weaker than a plan you can keep for years. Second, let gains stay in the system when that matches your goal. If every gain is removed immediately, the return never becomes part of the next base. Third, add regularly instead of waiting for perfect timing. Perfect timing sounds smart, but for most people, consistency is the part they can actually control. Fourth, control the things that can interrupt compounding. That includes panic selling, unrealistic promises, high-interest debt, excessive fees, and lifestyle choices that consume every increase in income. Fifth, give the process enough time to become visible. Do not judge a long-term engine by the noise it makes in the first few miles. This does not mean every investment will work. It does not mean higher return is always better. It does not mean risk disappears because you waited long enough. It means time is one of the few forces that can turn ordinary consistency into something more meaningful. And the earlier you understand that, the less you need to rely on dramatic moves. Compounding is quiet in the beginning because it is building the base. The mistake is thinking quiet means useless. The people who benefit from compounding are not the people who demand proof immediately. They are the people who understand that the proof often arrives late. If this helped you see compounding differently, comment with one thing you want to start compounding: money, knowledge, health, or a skill. And subscribe to Robert for more clear money frameworks that help you see deeper than the surface.